It's time to present you the newest tier list for patch 4.3D. And without any further ado, let's hop straight into it. First up comes the Baron lane, and here we have barely any changes. Fiora is still the best carry, and then everything below is basically the same as before. Something you can keep in mind is that Renekton got buffed, but the champion generally isn't as good in the meta, and Wukong also got buffed as well. So if you want to make any adjustments, it would be Wukong into S tier, and that's literally it. However, there's one champion that you have to look out for, and that is Teemo. Teemo could be very powerful, but in the current rank climate and the way people play him, he's just never doing anything and always dying. For the tank tier, there's also no real changes. Everything is still the same. Quite boring, isn't it? But well, maybe in the next big patch we see some changes here. With that wrapped up, let's move over to the jungle role. Lee Sin and Kha'Zix are the best champions of this patch. No other champion comes really close to them. But there's one champion that is just a tiny bit away from being as broken as they are, and it's Hecarim. Simply for the fact that Hecarim is so unbelievably easy to play and yet still absolutely broken. His second ability got nerfed, yes, and it was a sizable nerf, but it's still a very powerful champion that you need to have on your champion pool if you want to climb. Other than this, you still have the other culprits that are typically as powerful as before, and they're just wreaking havoc in WildRift. So if you want to climb with the highest win rate, the best stats possible, I can only recommend you to pick champions of the highest tier. Everything below is more of a coin flip scenario. Yone takes too long to farm, Aatrox can't really carry on his own, Riven is just Riven, Rengar jumps in and dies, or if it's a bruiser, he basically tanks 50k damage but doesn't do too much, and it's just a mess. With the exception of AP champions. Echo and Fizz can still be very broken, but it requires a little bit of gold and time for them to reach that point. As for champions in the B tier, I will not even talk about them, because honestly speaking, if you want to climb, you should stay away very far from the B tier. For the tanks in the jungle, we still have Volibear as the best champion, Rammus is getting close, Jarvan, like all of these champions are very solid picks with the exception of Warwick, who is by far the worst champion out of all of these, well, similar to Sion. All the other champions are very good and have all their niche situations in which they're very powerful, but generally speaking, you can most of the time just lock in the Volibear, just lock in the Jarvan, even the Mundo, they are very powerful champions. So don't get me wrong, carrying is nice, but if you're less of a mechanical genius or a flashy player, just lock in one of these tanks, teamfight the enemy, and enjoy your time being super chunky. With the jungle wrapped up, we now move over to the mid lane. Vladimir is still a very broken champion. Yes, he has gotten nerfed, but he's still scaling like an absolute demon as a mage. The only other champion within this tier that can rival his problematic stats and damage profile would be Twisted Fate, but Twisted Fate is infinitely harder to play than Vladimir will ever be. And the same goes for all the other champions in the S tier, with the exception of Annie. She is, well, the easiest of all of them. Champions in the A tier are usually niche champions that are only picked into certain situations, and champions in the B tier barely have any place. Aurelion Sol requires you to be a one-trick and constantly rotate around the map and hope for the enemy's stupidity. Brand is just Brand. Seraphine is probably the best out of the bunch here with her ability to clear wave on cooldown and have teamfight impact. Morgana is a useless mid laner, Kayle is a useless mid laner, and Galio is very team dependent, so you really don't want to play with any of those B tier champions in most of your games unless you're a one-trick. For the assassin tier, we have Ahri as the best champion for us. The reason is her mobility on the map. She can basically roam on cooldown with her wave control. She can clear waves and then leave towards one side and make things happen, which is the biggest benefit of this champion compared to all other assassins here. She has way more mobility, she has way more catch, and is super annoying to deal with. For example, if a Fizz jumps you, you will die, but is the Fizz going to do so reliably? Not that often. Is Diana doing the same? Also not that often. And are both able to clear waves without problem? Not really. The same also applies to every other champion. For example, Akali is a very broken champion, but if she doesn't hit you with a shuriken flip or isn't level 5, she doesn't really do anything to you. The same applies to Zed. He has barely any kill pressure on you, any rotating pressure over you, unless he's level 5 and has Ignite. The only champion that I'm looking at in the A tier that is basically maybe underrated here is Kassadin. Kassadin is the straight up counter to Vladimir, because Vladimir can't do shit into Kassadin, but Kassadin is very much limited to his own lane, even more than other champions. Plus, he takes more time to deal damage, but in the long term or long run, he will deal even more damage than all of the other champions champions while featuring insane mobility. So it's basically a give or take, a balancing act between giving up early power and rotational advantages over a superior late game. This is also the name of the game for the other tier in mid lane. We have Jace as the best mid laner, but there's one problem. For example, if the enemy picks up Yasuo, you will have fun in the early game, but the moment the Yasuo has played its steel caps, you don't really do too much to him anymore. You can clear the wave, yes, but you can't really walk up to him because plated steel caps are just simply unbalanced. The same also kind of applies to all the other champions in the S tier, because you really shouldn't pick them into Yasuo, because Yasuo makes your life a living hell. Another issue in the S tier for mid lane is Lucian. He doesn't really scale too much anymore, and he's a victim of his short range. All the other champions in the S tier like Corki and Jhin scale vastly better and are just way stronger as a champion. However, if you want to play for early aggression, Lucian will be your fit for doing it all. Now if we take a look into the A tier, we see Akshan, and all the other champions within this A tier barely have any lane presence. Akshan's early game is very overpowered and he might be the best early game champion, but the biggest issue of Akshan is he can't really carry most of his games. His range isn't high enough and his damage scaling, as we hit the later stages of the game, isn't enough to carry. His saving grace, however, is the ability to revive his allies by just one simple play, and all the champions in the B tier are, well, just stay away from them. Now let's move over to your favorite role, the AD carries, and here we have Tristana as the best champion. Tristana's newest build with the Bloodthirster rush after Gluttonous Greaves into Navori is basically the bread and butter for your champion. If your champion cannot run Gluttonous Greaves into Bloodthirster, you will have big trouble in solo queue unless your entire kit can make up for it. There's also some new stuff when it comes to itemization and Duskblade. What many champions can do now if they built Bloodthirster previously is going Duskblade into Bloodthirster. This will allow them to snowball a little bit harder in the early game with a higher risk because you don't have lifesteal that early. But if you get to snowball, you'll literally put the enemy right into the dirt without them being able to do anything. However, whatever you do, don't get trapped into building multiple lethality items. That will be too much and you will very much suffer from that. Out of all the champions in the S tier, there are two champions that have a very bad laning phase, and that is Nyla and Kai'Sa. Both of these champions should not be able to lane unless the enemy makes mistakes, or you have the better support champion on your team, or you're just skill checking them. All the other champions in the S tier have very good lane presence and can dominate enemy champions. If the world would be perfect, you would also put Caitlyn up here because she's an obnoxious demon when it comes to lane presence and just taking the enemy down. A very underrated champion, however, is Xayah. She desires a certain draft to be played into, and that's the only reason why she is an S tier. And if you are a Draven 1 trick, then Draven will be automatically S tier as well. All the other champions are very fine with the A tier, and Lucian might even be worse because outside of a laning presence, he doesn't have anything for bot lane. He is literally, he doesn't really do anything anymore thanks to all the adjustments and item changes. It's a sad time for Lucian players. For the mages, nothing much has changed. It's still the same, Lux being annoying as always, and all the other champions further below are basically situational picks. Seraphine is very good into all-in, Ziggs is a very good blind champion, Vex is very powerful into enemy movement champions, Veigar is insanely OP against melee champions, Karma is a good poke champion and setup champion, Zoe requires you to be absolutely faker, doper, whatever you want to be, and Swain only shines into melee champions. Twisted Fate is pretty decent with a CC support like Thresh. Brand would be good into melee champions, but Mercury Treads really destroy him. Morgana is good with Leona, for example, or Lockdown CC so the enemy can't move. And Orianna is a champion that takes a lot of time to scale, but once she has scaled, she is very good generally. Now that we're done with AD champions, let's talk about support. Support is a role that's very overpowered and features a lot of overpowered champions, so let's start with engaging. Nautilus is absolutely broken still. Leona is very close, Thresh is very close, and out of all these champions with the S tier and higher, Thresh, Leona, and Nautilus are the most broken champions, right next to Rakan if the Rakan player is good. Below this, we have less consistent champions with Alistar and Zed, and in the B tier, as per usual, champions you should generally avoid unless you are a one-trick. For the Protect tier, we have Janna as the most unbalanced shit on the planet. It requires less skill than Yuumi, by the way, and it's absolutely stupid, and all you have to do is start with Relic Shield and rush Harmonic Echoes, which is something you'll do on every single enchanter that is like Sona, Soraka, and Janna. Don't go for boots, rush Harmonic Echoes, and you'll see the power of your champion. And then it's all about just spamming abilities on Harmonic Echoes cooldown. With the changes to the armor pen items, Pyke also has gotten way stronger. He got a free buff on Dustblade and on the armor pen boots, which make him even more threatening than he was before. You can also use the same thing on Senna while utilizing a new lethality build that is very risky to pull off, but into full squishy compositions, it is absolutely fun. As for Karma, she's still the old usual. Lux is still very overbearing during the laning phase, and once you get hit by a binding, you simply die. Seraphine is quite weak in comparison, but is still very good into enemy all-in if you play together as a team, which happens super rarely. Swain doesn't really do too much anymore because he needs too much gold to be functional, and is only really a utility bot with the Rylai's like being annoying. And unironically speaking, Brand simply doesn't have enough damage as of now. And that's it for today's video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Become a member, take a look at the coaching videos, the masterclasses, and everything you need to know to become a better player, and then we'll see each other in the next video. Thank you all for watching, see you.